Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Our first story today comes to us from Mad Dan Eccles 1. Arrogant mechanic wants a job, he can have it. Let's jump right in. Years ago, my wife and I had a 13-year-old car with about 250,000 miles on the clock. It was mechanically sound and drove like a dream, but getting through the annual UK emissions test was getting increasingly difficult. Usually, it was just a case of running some injector cleaner through the engine and giving her a really good run before the test so that the engine was fully up to temperature, etc. But one year, the inspector attempted the test 3 times and failed her on high HC, unburnt fuel in the exhaust. I had a good look and found a crack in the exhaust manifold, which was sucking in air. So engine management was compensating by injecting extra fuel, and as a result, the catalytic converter was fried. Being that the car was sound in every other respect and I had no desire to replace it, I got my socket set out and started dismantling the exhaust system. All good until I found 3 of the exhaust header nuts were seized and no amount of heat, lubricant, and gentle persuasion was going to move them. I've been there before, and last time, I spent 2 days carefully drilling out the studs. So my wife took the car into a local garage to get them to take a look and quote us for the work. The mechanic, a cocky wee craphead who evidently thought he knew everything, checked it over and gave my wife a quote for a new cat, lambda sensor, manifold, and labor. But he failed to consider the possibility of seized header nuts, and we certainly weren't going to tell him. The quote had some added extras that my wife hadn't asked for, and came with an arrogant and condescending attitude, no doubt because a woman couldn't possibly understand how a car works. I know it's a lot of money, love, but that car needs a lot done to it, like hell it did. My darling beloved played the submissive wife part to perfection. Oh, I'm not sure, I'll have to ask my husband, etc, etc. So the mechanic knocked a few quid off to sweeten the deal. After work that night, we looked over the quote, noticed all the unnecessary extra work on it, but we figured that with the time it would take me to sort out those seized nuts, it was worth it. If he wanted the job for that price, he could have it. So the next day, my wife takes the car back, confirms that the quote is a fixed price for the job, and tells them to get on with it. It'll be ready this evening, love, the mechanic says, apparently happy with his deal. That afternoon, we get a call. We had some problems. It'll be a couple of extra days. A few days later, my wife goes back to pick up the car. The manager deals with it and informs my wife that there is an extra charge for the additional work required. My wife calmly slides the quote across the desk. Your mechanic gave me a fixed price for the job. Here's the quote signed by him. The manager is quite obviously seething, begrudgingly takes payment for the agreed amount, and hands over the keys together with a 12-month warranty for the parts that they used. She heard the manager screaming at the mechanic as she left. The next year, I presented the car for its annual test. It failed on the cheap catalytic converter they had used. Back to the garage with the car, and my wife asks them to replace the cat. That'll be 250 pounds, love, or however much it was. No, it won't, replied my wife, and slides the warranty with 2 weeks left on it across the desk. They fixed it for free, but the manager told her in no uncertain terms never to darken his doorstep with that car ever again. It's interesting that OP said that no amount of heat was going to remove those bolts, because there definitely is an amount of heat that would work. You know, the amount of heat that turns those bolts into liquid. One thing to keep in mind is that that new part will have a 12-month warranty on it as well. You probably won't get the labor paid out of it, because I think the labor would be applied to the original one way back when, but at least you'd get the free parts if something went wrong. Do me a quick favor and take a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're actually not subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. This next story comes to us from 10 Shimkey. Daisy chain power extenders to make power cables tidier at the risk of power trip? Sure, let's jump right in. I was involved in a pilot project and we had to do a proof of concept. We proceeded to set up several terminals in a room and connect each terminal to the nearest power outlet. I think we had over 10 terminals. When everything was done, it did look a bit messy, but we tried our best to make it look as nice as possible. When we were packing up for the day, a manager from another department decided to pay us a visit. He was furious about how untidy the whole setup was and demanded we redo the power cables because they are not tucked all the way to the back where nobody can see them. He told me to use the power outlet at the rear as the main source of power and daisy chain power extenders to reach the terminals. I told him that by following this method, it is dangerous and will definitely trip the power. He told me off and said that's insubordination, and I'm setting a bad example for the rest of the team by not following orders from higher management. Cue malicious compliance. I told the whole team to follow the manager's instructions despite the obvious dangers. After he checked that all cables were neat and tidy, he told us to go home and not do anything else since it might ruin the setup. Pretty funny statement coming from someone who has just ruined it. Day of the test came, and to nobody's surprise, the power tripped once we turned on all the terminals. I did not land myself in hot water, but had to explain to the stakeholders what happened, and was told to be more assertive in my argument from my manager. Rolled my eyes. Not sure what happened to that manager, but that was the last time anyone outside of my department tried to meddle with us. OP added a quick edit onto the end of the story. It says, edit. I had to listen to another department's manager because the project involves a few departments, and we were told by the organization to try and accommodate all the manager's requests. But nobody thought to insert the word reasonable into it. Yes, I could have run it past my manager to prevent this mess, but at that point in time, I'm sick of arguing and just want to go home ASAP. You know, I think your boss was actually right in the end that you should have been a little bit more assertive with telling them how much of a problem this could cause. Although I don't think I would have used power trip as my fighting words in that case. I probably would have used fire hazard or extreme safety hazard, something like that. This next story today comes to us from Jaya Papaya. Push me to keep drawing things for you? Be careful what you wish for. Let's jump right in. I just published the first episode of my webcomic, which reminded me of this event a few years ago. Context. I had just moved across the country to the west coast of the US and started high school at a hybrid homeschool. Think a college-like schedule, but with stay-at-home parents and a nursery to accommodate the babies they brought. I had been in Montessori, charter, private Catholic, magnet, and just regular old public school, so I stood out like a sore thumb to my classmates who had been homeschooled since, well, forever. The other girl in this story was one of those kids. Let's call her Betty. We had gotten along pretty well, we sat together in a few core classes, and both had an interest in creative writing. I was pretty decent at drawing at the time and still doodle pretty regularly. This caught her attention, and pretty soon we had a relationship of her stashing away the loose leaf drawings I didn't want, which was fine by me as it was mutual. But as most artists can tell you, sometimes people get a little too comfortable with requests and start to get pushy. Malicious compliance. Betty and I were both in the after-school theater program, and rehearsals took a long time, especially when you were a background character waiting for your cue. So I had my sketchbook and began drawing some old OCs, a married couple just interacting in general. Now, Betty really loved these characters. She thought they were adorable. At this point, I think she had about 30 different pages of drawings of characters from this series. So when she asked me to draw some more, I didn't mind and made a quick sketch of them hugging. She tilts her head at it, like she's content with it, but expected more. She hands it back to me and asks if I could make more. I was already on another set of characters from the series, so I told her I would once I finished this other doodle. The moment I put the pen down, she asks if I'm done and if I can make her more. I just accepted it as enthusiasm for my work, but it irked me a little that she couldn't wait a bit longer. So I make her another drawing, and she makes the same request for more. After about 3 more drawings, I finally had it. You want these two characters interacting so bad? I'll give it to you. A little thing about Betty was that she came from a very religious background, and many of her classmates at the homeschool did too. Certain topics were just not discussed in the open with a blasé attitude. I, however, hung out with the furry fangirls while at public school, which meant lots and lots of hentai etc. exposure. That combined with very literal and rational parents, sex was just a typical run-of-the-mill occurrence. We eat, we drink, we sleep, and we screw. And if you're married, you presumably screw your partner. I think you can all see where this is going. With a smile, I take the paper back, fold a small corner so she and myself could hide it easily, and proceed to draw the wife getting D'd the F down. Lots of detail in all the right places. Sweat drops and all the sound effects around them. Took about a minute. I handed it back to her and went, "Here, I hope you like this one." Her look of excitement quickly fades and she goes silent. I feel a little bad as I remember she's not used to explicit things like me, so I go back to drawing. We finish up rehearsals, go home, and that was it. Conclusion. The next day during class break, Betty comes up to me and sheepishly goes, "If you're not busy, would you be able to draw something for me, please?" I smiled and replied, "I'm not busy at all, and thank you for asking. What would you like?" Betty and I have been best friends for nearly 7 years. OOP, I think you might have opened their eyes up to something completely new, and now you might have a super fan. Is anybody else out there wondering exactly what it was she was asking for at the end? 'Cause I'd sure like to know. This next story comes to us from Pyro Stones. So you need a man's brain to do all of that? Okay, let's jump right in. First, context. Since I, male 28, was 11, my parents are divorced. My mother, female 64, got custody and we would see our father once a weekend every 2 weeks. I have also a little sister, female 25, so I ended up being the only man in the house. Growing up, our mother always taught us that we needed to participate in house duties, such as washing the dishes, taking out the laundry, preparing food. We would take turns, and during the week, us children would take care of all of that, because our mother would come back from work exhausted and expected to not have anything to do once at home. And we kind of were okay with that. Only that as young children, we would often forget to do stuff and it would cause a fight. But we ended up learning to not forget. Only there are some tasks that wouldn't be fairly distributed. My mother always needed a man close so that she could give him some work to do. And even though she never remarried and only dated 1 or 2 men after she divorced, she always found some male friend or some friend's husband or boyfriend to whom she could ask for help. Until at some point, people started to realize that she was being close to them for the only purpose that she could ask them for help. Yeah, she's one of those tit-for-tat people where if she does something for you, you have to give back something equivalent or you disappear from her life. So basically, she lost a few friends. But at some point, I was old enough to be useful, and she started asking me for help on these matters. OP, the internet box doesn't work anymore. Can you look it up? It needs a man's brain to understand that. OP, I just bought some furniture from IKEA. Can you build it for me? It needs a man's brain to understand that. OP, can you carry luggage? Only a strong man can do that. OP, can you look up why my computer is being slow? It needs a man's brain to understand that. And so on. I asked repeatedly that she looked at how I dealt with these things so that she could understand herself and fix it alone next time, especially when it was something so basic as to restart the internet box. But she didn't want to learn. She just wanted me to do it because she didn't want to have to deal with it herself. And it went on for a few years, growing from just restarting the box to piercing onto walls so that she could hang mirrors and stuff. For info, I never did anything of all that before she asked me to do it, so I guess it made me learn it, which is a good thing. But what bothered me was that she just didn't care and expected me to do all that because it was normal, and me knowing about it or not was not a question. I'm a man, so that's my job. And as I was growing up, and her still not learning anything, I got more and more frustrated. Until this one final time, I don't remember what specific task it was, where she told me that it was a man's job, needing a man's brain. I had a huge sigh, did the job, then went back to my business. Cue the malicious compliance. As some tasks require a man's brain, it's obvious that some others require a woman's touch, as we men are all about the technique, big thinking, and strength work. So the following days, I started to wash the dishes and put them back anywhere in the kitchen. Because us men have no idea about where goes what in a house. We just fix things and carry heavy stuff. I forgot to get food back in the fridge because, that's already cooked so it won't spoil. I overcooked my steak, eggs, pizza, because, I was so busy thinking about all these techniques and stuff that I didn't have the brain space to think about checking food. Laundry would be spread to dry, one piece onto another, because it is more efficient as it saves space. And about cleaning the house, let's just say it was a waste of time because I could perfectly live in my own mess. Of course, it didn't take long for my mother to get angry at me for not taking care of the house or for doing it so stupidly. To which I answered, sorry. I mean, it takes a woman's brain to understand how to take care of a house correctly, which yes, is totally sexist. But so is saying that all the work she made us do was for men only. So at first she was dumbfounded, then the storm unleashed. It still is one of the biggest fights we had to this day. Things calmed down, and I went back to caring properly, until she asked for my man's brain again. From this point, I stopped caring. I would forget the laundry in the washing machine, let the dishes pile up in the sink, and would only do my man's job. She would still get really angry, ordering me to do stuff, which I would ultimately do, completely half-arsed, meaning that she had to do it all over after me, because half of the dishes were just out on the kitchen, not at their place. Laundry was all stuck together to dry, and so on. Mood in the house was tensed, and it wouldn't need much for a fight to blow up. Until at some point she asked me to help her do this or that, not to do it for her anymore. So I helped. I showed her how to do it. I took time for it. We did it together multiple times until she finally learned how to do it. I then started taking care of my duties as I did before, and things went back to normal. Finally. I think the biggest takeaway from this one is that if you want somebody else to do some work, you should at least be willing to help as well, or to even sit down and learn the processes yourself, because asking somebody else all the time doesn't make that person very happy. This next story comes to us from Derposaurus. You want me to speak to your insurance? Sure. Enjoy an at-fault claim on your policy. Let's jump right in. I work as an auto insurance adjuster for simple claims. For some background, one of the most complicated types of claims that I deal with are backing claims, like a person backing out of a space or similar. This is because backing claims have a potential for shared responsibility, depending on location of damage, statements, and so on. Typically for backing claims, it is crucial to take a very specific statement from both drivers to see the scene, even if virtually, and review the damage on both cars to determine liability. I received a claim. CV backed into IV. This means the claimant or other person backed into my person. Usually in most backing claims, there is a claim opened on both insurance companies, so they can each do their own investigation. Additionally, there's a process for billing the other company once liability has been determined. So insurance companies often speak during this process. It was day 5 for me, and I haven't been able to reach either my insured or the claimant after several texts, calls, and emails to both parties. My last call attempt for the day to the claimant, and I got an answer. I was immediately cut off before I could even finish introducing myself. She essentially stated that she will not speak to me at all, and that I will have to speak to her insurance. I asked if she had an open claim and a claim number to save me the trouble, and she stated, "I'm not in a place to provide you that at this time." I briefly mentioned just wanting to take her statement and that her insurance would want me to do the same, but she doubled down and told me she will absolutely not speak to me before disconnecting the call. Okay, fine. I then found her insurance company, confirmed she hadn't opened a claim yet, then opened a claim on her behalf. I disclosed the information that I knew, location of damage on both cars, and the original facts of loss. Claimant backed into my insured. Her insurance agreed with me over the phone that it sounded like claimant was most likely at fault, but obviously they will do their investigation. Location of damage alone paints a very clear picture. Damage on the claimant rear bumper and damage to my insured's rear door is typically always 100% at fault on the backing party, because they owe the greater duty to yield right of way and maintain proper lookout. Fast forward an hour and I get a call from my insured. She told me she had been speaking with the claimant for several days, and they were negotiating an out-of-pocket solution. Now, this is normal and some people do this, but if the claimant had just told me that in the first place, I wouldn't have had to file an at-fault claim on her insurance. If you know anything about insurance, the claimant's ultimate goal was to avoid her premiums from going up, but now she will have an at-fault claim on her policy that will certainly taint her records. Enjoy! Every time I hear a story about insurance claims, it just makes me think that people really need to jump on the bandwagon of having dash cams in their cars. And not just the ones that look forward, but the ones that look backwards as well. Or, in the case of a Tesla, one that looks out all four sides of the vehicle and records them at all times. Pretty epic, honestly. That dash cam in your car turns a he said, she said situation into a, well, I have footage, so let's go over this again, shall we? Check out all 5 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.